So the question is, can we successfully treat fungal or yeast infections in the mare? And the answer is yes. Some with more success than others. And some of these infections can be relatively easy to treat if we catch them early on and treat them aggressively to start with, while other times they become quite difficult to treat, very chronic type of infections. And I've seen cases that people have been trying to treat for over a year, 2 years, and the mare still has a fungal infection. So those cases are really, really difficult when we get those. Oftentimes by the time we see these cases, they've tried almost everything that we typically would try, so we're trying to figure out what's the next step we can go to. And that's where we pull in, rely on some of our more advanced diagnostics to give us more information than trying to just kind of pick something out of our arsenal and treat these mares with. Candida and Aspergillus are the most common species of yeast and fungal hyphae that we see in our mares, but oftentimes when we get these cases that have been treated multiple times and now we're being called in as the specialist on them, we'll actually do an ID and sensitivity on the yeast to try to identify what the actual agent is and what it is sensitive to, because sometimes we'll find that what they've been treating with, the agent actually isn't sensitive to. Whereas with our bacterial endometritis, every single time we do a bacterial culture in the lab, we always get an ID and sensitivity. Getting an ID and sensitivity takes a little bit more work and often requires sending the sample off to another lab. So sometimes we don't have that information, and it can often take a week, 10 days sometimes to get the results back, so you're already treating. And that's why sometimes these infections become more chronic or go on longer, just because of the information we start out with and how we kind of approach these. One thing you'll learn in veterinary medicine is when we have many different modalities or treatments for a problem, that usually means we don't completely understand the problem or haven't quite figured out what the best way to treat it is. So we have a number of different treatments that we'll try in these mares with a fungal endometritis. And sometimes you'll have one that seems like, oh, that's working really well, and then you'll get a case that doesn't work at all on. And as Dr. Schnobrick just mentioned, one of the things we've realized is that, as with our bacterial infections, in the fungal infections, these agents will produce a biofilm, and so that makes them able to basically hide from our treatments. They can attach to the endometrial wall and pretty much be protected from both the mare's immune system and also from the agents that we're trying to treat it with. And when these cases, we get these cases that have been very chronic, that's when we like to send off for that assay to tell us what agent is growing, what is it sensitive to, and also what is effective against breaking up that particular yeast or fungus fungal hyphae's biofilm. Because I can put all the antifungals in there I want to, but if the biofilm isn't disrupted, my antifungal agents are not going to work. Oftentimes these require more protracted treatment than our bacterial endometritis cases. Typically with the bacterial endometritis case, we're treating them 3-5 days typically, and except for the really difficult cases, that'll resolve a fairly normal bacterial infection. These we're more likely to treat 10 to 14 days, especially those that have become chronic problems, and some of them I've treated even longer than that, because I found that if I treat them and leave them just for a week or so, either I didn't get rid of the infection or it comes back. Probably did not get rid of it completely is what we suspect. But you can get a negative culture on these mares and come back 2 weeks later and you can grow the yeast or fungus again. So probably didn't get rid of it. Also, we've come to realize it may be residing in other parts of the reproductive tract, such as the clitoris. That's something we speculate, why does it keep coming back in some of these mares? Some of these mares, as soon as you get them treated, you want to try to get them pregnant, get the cervix closed down, kind of change the uterine environment, hopefully. And because what we find is if we leave them, sometimes you'll treat them in the winter, the client says, oh, I don't want to breed her till later in the spring. And you can get 2 or 3 negative cultures on these mares, and all of a sudden it's back again. It's very, very frustrating. So it's like, let's get her treated, and then let's do what we need to do, hopefully get her pregnant and get out of her uterus. What's interesting is I've seen fungal endometritis cases. You'll read in the literature, usually mares with poor perineal conformation, older mares, that type of thing. I've seen it in mares post-foaling that on their first culture at 30 days, they have a raging fungal infection for some unknown reason. There's no reason they shouldn't be any different than any other mare, but obviously that mare was susceptible for some reason to becoming infected. I've seen it in mares that have been treated for a protracted bacterial endometritis that sometimes seems to set them up for a fungal infection where they've been treated over and over intrauterine with antibiotics, and we seem to disrupt their normal normal environment in their uterus, which typically they shouldn't have bacteria in there, but you just upset the pH and everything else, and some of those mares will then, you'll get the bacterial endometritis cleared up, and then you've got raging fungal endometritis, which is probably 10 times worse in our opinion. I've seen it in mares that have had a large number of embryo transfer flushes done, sometimes just repeated insult to the uterus over and over. Also, if they're having to treat them in between, if they are susceptible to developing a bacterial endometritis. And so they get treated for the bacterial endometritis, get bred, embryo flush, then they treat them again. Some of those mares get set up for a fungal endometritis. So the long and short of it, can we treat them? Yes. Are they easy to treat? Not always. And we're very excited to be involved with a study we're just starting with Platinum Performance on trying to understand potentially if there's something different in these mares, in their microbiome, in their digestive flora. Is there something different in these mares that makes them more susceptible to developing these fungal endometritis cases? We know in women that some women are more susceptible to developing yeast infections than others. Some of those women are very sensitive if they're placed on antibiotics, even systemic antibiotics. They'll be more likely to develop a yeast infection, whereas other women never seem to have problems with that. So from that standpoint, hopefully in a year we have more information about why some mares are more likely to develop a fungal endometritis, and hopefully leads us to better treatment options.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Bradecamp.